What is going on, everybody? We're going to get started here in just a minute. I'm just checking to make sure everything is going. Getting my chat sitting somewhere where I can actually see it. There'll be about a 10-second delay between what you guys see on the screen and what is happening live. So if it takes me a minute to respond to the chat and things like that, that is why. How you guys doing? It's been a while since we've done this, hasn't it? A lot been going on in my life. Won't get into all of it, but most importantly, many of you saw that a few weeks ago we lost my grandfather, who biologically was my grandfather, but he was really my dad because I was raised by my grandparents. My grandpa was 37 when I was born, so he was young enough to be my dad. So yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks, and he is one of the main reasons why I fell in love with history. He and my grandmother did everything they could to encourage my love of history, took me to battlefields and things like that for family vacations, things like that. So, yeah, so it's been a while, a lot of stuff going on. Going to try to get back to regular streaming, things like that. So I hope you guys are all doing well. It's great to see you. I'm also going to get back to the gaming channel, getting caught up on that stuff too. So, but yeah, this is fun. We're going to be doing some new campaign trail. But also, it's a Q&A time, so feel free to ask questions and just kind of throw things out there, and we'll have a time to chat. Can talk to you about some of the stuff that's upcoming. I know, Ian, that West Brom game today was crazy. Luton go up 2-0 after like 11 minutes, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a long day, because Luton haven't lost at home since like the beginning of September. And then West Brom comes back, gets a goal in the first half by DK, and then 2 goals in 3 minutes in the second half to win it. So great. Can't wait to get to the Hawthorns and see something at some point. So, yeah, I appreciate all of your kind words and your condolences, everyone. So we are going to dive into one I haven't done yet. This is the 1852 election. This is one of the mods. And after this one's done, I can show you guys how to load mods if you've never done it. The link is in the description if you ever want to play new campaign trail for yourself. Sir Daddy, thank you so much. Yeah, was it West Ham that lost to the Wolves today? Because Wolves haven't been beating anybody. And I'm going to my first Premier League match, my first European football match here in just over a week. My friend Rob, who lives over in the UK, he is a sports photographer and a huge Fulham supporter, is taking me to Craven Cottage to see Fulham Spurs. So I am so excited about that. Yeah, see, I wish West Ham would have beat Wolves, because, as a West Brom fan, I always love to see Wolves lose. Who would have thought that getting rid of Steve Bruce would be a massive benefit? Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this. We are going to be taking on the role. If you guys are not familiar with how Campaign Trail works, they ask a series of questions, and you answer the questions as the candidate that you're running as. And you try to win the election. And I like to try and change history. So I like to take on the role of someone who didn't win and try to help them win. Or if I'm feeling really feisty and I want to see somebody go down, like, say, he who must not be named, Woodrow Wilson, I'll try to take on the role of the candidate and just throw the election and cause them to lose it. So, Jacob Raleigh, thank you so much. We could do the 1880 election. That would be a really interesting one. I could take on the role of Winfield Scott Hancock in that one. Cameron, I appreciate that you are willing to even watch this Rangers supporter stream, knowing that you're a Celtic fan. So, all right, so we're going to take on Winfield Scott. So let's talk about this election real quick, and I will get to your questions when I can here and there. Connor, probably no Napoleon today, probably tomorrow, the next one. So Winfield Scott is a general. So is Franklin Pierce. Winfield Scott, lifelong career military guy. Franklin Pierce does have some political history to him. Franklin Pierce is going to win this election, mainly because Scott doesn't really have anything to run on in this election. He can't really run on his military service. Yes, he was one of the commanding generals in the Mexican-American War, but Franklin Pierce was also a general in the Mexican-American War. Winfield Scott can't really run as a anti-slavery candidate because his party, the Whigs, are a pro-slavery platform. So he doesn't have that to distinguish him. So there's really not a lot distinguishing Franklin Pierce's Democrats and Winfield Scott's Whigs during this election. So it really comes down to a battle of personalities in this one. Winfield Scott would be the guy from the Pig Wars video. He is the commanding general of the U.S. Army when the American Civil War begins. But he's at the end of his life. He's a War of 1812 veteran. Cameron, I totally understand. You live in Scott County, Virginia, Zachary. I have roots in Scott County, Virginia. My England family, the last name England, came from there. Okay, so let's read this. Following the death of Zachary Taylor in 1850 and President Fillmore's tumultuous administration, two dark horse candidates face each other in the presidential election of 1852 as slavery threatens the integrity of the Union. By the time we get to 1850, slavery has always been a major political issue in the United States from its founding, but it's coming to a head now. We're getting like within a decade of the American Civil War, compromises are starting to kind of not be enough anymore. Franklin Pierce benefits from the strength of the Democrats this year and must preserve his lead while making the case that he can unite the country despite sectional grudges. Winfield Scott faces an uphill battle and needs to take advantage of his war hero status while preserving party unity, as the Whigs are only a shadow of what they once were. Yeah, the Whigs are kind of on the way out as a political force in this country. Pierce is from New Hampshire. Winfield Scott's from New Jersey. So it's going to be a tough campaign to win. And it was historically kind of a landslide, 51% to 44% in popular vote. Electoral votes 254 to 42. Scott only wins 4 of the 31 states. He wins Kentucky, Tennessee, Vermont, and Massachusetts, and that's it. So it's going to be a really, really tough election for them to win. The last Whig to actually win a presidential race is already in the distant past by this point. F. Shopes, thank you so much. Play Scott on easy. It's impossible to win on normal. We're going to try and at least improve his standing. I always do these on normal. I doubt I can win it because he really had very little chance in this election. Hope everybody's doing well. We got 350 people in the stream. That's awesome. Yeah, Kentucky Lady, thank you for that, CJ family. You're a Michigan girl who became a rural Kentucky lady. Very cool. What part of Kentucky? Winfield Scott not only served in the Mexican War, he was kind of the hero of the Mexican War. He ends up being kind of the lead general. He's the one that ends up kind of being viewed as the guy who wins the war. Him and Zachary Taylor were kind of the two main generals in the war. But as I said, Franklin Pierce was a brigadier general during the Mexican War, so he was a big part of that too. If I were a presidential candidate, what election year would I have wanted to run in? Ooh, that's a good one. 1912 to take on Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, we're going to do some more historical picture videos down the road, yeah. No, Pierce's wife did not want her husband to become president, and she kind of blamed the fact that he ran for and won the election for the death of their son. A horrible, horrible death in a train accident where he's basically decapitated right in front of his family. And Pierce, after that, kind of drinks himself into a stupor during his presidency. His presidency was a disaster. Zachary Van Dyke, thank you for that. Cameron, thank you so much. If sports were as political as they are in Europe and the U.S., how do I think it would have affected American history? That's a great question that I don't know there's an easy answer to. But yeah, they're not as, like, we don't really have an equivalent in the United States to, like, the Celtic Rangers rivalry and all the religious and political implications of that. I can't think of any real comparison to that here. Hey, Ron. It's tough because I don't know that most presidential candidates could have done well in the 1850s. I feel like it would have taken an exceptional, like, once-in-a-generation politician to have pulled off a decent presidency at this point, just because of how ugly the situation is. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into this. The third time's the charm for Winfield Scott, who clinched on to win the Whig nomination on the 53rd ballot after seeking it in 1840 and 1848, having served in the army since before the War of 1812 and being its commanding general for 10 years. Scott holds a status as a war hero, though his highly publicized career gives the Democrats plenty of ammunition to attack him with. As the third general nominated by the Whig Party, Scott would have seemed poised to get elected like Taylor and Harrison before him. This would be true if the party was not divided over slavery after President Fillmore passed the controversial fugitive slave law as part of the Compromise of 1850. So the fugitive slave law, which basically backed up something that was already in the Constitution, basically said that if a runaway enslaved person ends up going into a free state, so let's say that there's a 20-year-old slave from Virginia who runs and gets into Ohio, because Ohio and Virginia border each other at this point, and gets into Ohio and tries to hide out in the home of a family in Ohio that runs part of the Underground Railroad. Legally, Ohio citizens are required to turn that person back over to their owner in Virginia. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. I have played the political machine. It's been a while. We're going to choose our running mate. This is where it gets complicated. So we've got Edward Bates from Missouri, who ends up serving in Lincoln's cabinet a few years later. We could go Francis Granger from New York, James Jones of Tennessee. I'm tempted to choose a Southern candidate because Franklin Pierce is a New England guy, and I kind of feel like I might, as much as I abhor doing this personally, I might try to go the route of appeasing the South and kind of towing the line with the pro-slavery side of things here. But I don't know how well that's going to work. But I've got to do something unusual to have a chance here. Jacob Raleigh, thank you for that. What death was more fatal to the Confederates? I think Albert Sidney Johnston, because I don't know that the Confederates ever found a good, solid replacement for him in the Western theater. Joe Johnston was out there for a while, but he didn't have the support of Jefferson Davis, who never really gave him a good chance. So I think Johnston. JD, sounds like a bunch of biased pro-union propaganda to me. Absolutely. So everybody say hi to JD if you haven't already checked out the History Underground. Highly recommend that you do that. All right, so I'm going to choose William Graham. He's a senator from North Carolina after being elected governor, or before being elected governor of the state. He's then Secretary of the Navy under President Fillmore. That would tie my campaign to the incumbent administration, would do nothing to bring back the Free Soilers into the fold. On the other hand, his selection would add executive experience to the ticket. It could also help in the South. Now, there's not a lot of electoral votes to be had in the South, but it might at least help me to do better than Winfield Scott did historically. Scoopmeister, thank you so much. Dumping some simp money, I appreciate that. Yeah, and here's the thing, guys. Just letting you in on a little bit of behind the scenes, how YouTube works. Historically speaking, and JD could probably back this up, January and February are the worst months of the year for us content creators on YouTube in terms of what we make in terms of revenue. And right now, I am my family's sole kind of breadwinner. And YouTube is my primary means for making money. So it's a tough couple of months because the ad rates go way down. So ad revenue's really down. So donating like you guys are doing right now and support through things like Patreon and membership are huge in the Christmas aftermath, because you can get the same number of views and the same number of ad impressions on YouTube in January as you did in December, but the income's going to be way, way less. It's just how it works. So we're up to 450 people here. That's awesome. Here we go. Difficulty level. There's 25 questions on this one. This is the election of 1852. As you learn of your nomination at the Baltimore Convention on the 53rd ballot, what do you plan to emphasize in your acceptance letter? So a pro-compromise platform is a thorn in our side. I've been nominated on a pro-compromise platform, and I dutifully accept it. Emphasize my commitment to the integrity of the Union. So I'm going to try to be the compromise candidate. Let's look at the situation right now, though. Right now it's 254 to 42, which is that's actually exactly how it was historically. The 4 states I'm leading in are the 4 states that Winfield Scott won historically. So, yeah, it's worse when YouTube keeps restricting your content. JD's doing a phenomenal series right now from Munich, kind of covering the events of the 1930s and leading up into World War II, and the history of the Nazi Party and things like that. So good. And it's not a place we get to typically see content from, so I'm really enjoying that series a lot. Why can't you choose Abraham Lincoln as your running mate? I'm not sure you would in 1852. He's out of politics nationally at the moment. He served 1 term in Congress. This is before he's going to get back on the national stage in the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Dylan, thank you so much. You got snowed in. Where are you snowed in? So yeah, we'll do some more HO4 or HOI4 and maybe some CK3 down the road. Okay, so let's go back and we're going to choose a compromise platform. Taking a definite stance was probably the worst thing you could have done on this issue. Although you re-energized the South, this leaves Northerners and your patrons doubtful about your candidacy, and it's hard to win without some of these northern states. The 3 biggest states in terms of electoral college are New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. So it's going to be tough to win without taking a few of those. So Henry Clay, longtime leader of the Whig Party, has died on June 24th. How do you plan to address his death? It's a tragic loss for our party, and I pledge my commitment to the American system he designed for our economy. I'm going to just keep harping on compromise. The subtle embrace of the compromise will help you slightly in the South. The Whig Party mourns. All right, so it looks like North Carolina, especially because I chose a North Carolinian running mate, might be one we can swing. That's another 10 points. A lot of these are close. I mean, I feel like there's a chance in some of these places, but we'd have to get everything just right. Any 1800 candidate that I think could win the presidency today. It's tough without seeing and hearing them speak, because how you come across on camera is such a huge part of things today, where it wasn't back in the day. Okay. What do you have to say about the merits of your running mate, William Alexander Graham? We're going to focus on his experience, executive. Talk about our commitment to sectional compromise and moderate politics. We will emphasize his experience, be it as a governor, senator, or cabinet member. A Scott administration will not be an inexperienced one. We'll do that. Emphasizing Graham's experience will reassure a few voters concerned by the fact that you have never held an elected office. And it does take a little bit of time to see some of these decisions reflected in the map. Nixon sweats profusely. Exactly. William Jennings Bryan, I don't know. Maybe 20, 30 years ago. I don't know if I'd still say that today. But yeah, that's a good example of a candidate that I think would translate well in terms of like being a very dynamic speaker and somebody who appeals to the masses. Very much kind of a populist candidate. In spite of its stated goal of bringing the Union together, the Compromise of 1850 has been tearing the Whigs apart. Northerners who nominated you are resentful of Fillmore's implemented, Millard Fillmore being the previous president, implementation of the fugitive slave law, while Southerners are wary of the North drifting toward free soil positions. So this is kind of the trouble that Winfield Scott's dealing with, is that no matter what he does, he alienates half the people he's trying to get to vote for him. Burr would just shoot his opponent. Burr, I don't know. I don't know dynamic in terms of how he was as a speaker and things like that. I think he'd be probably rightfully accused of being pretty wishy-washy and kind of going which way the wind blows. and you'd see a lot of negative advertising against him on that. Top 5 countries I've never been to that I want to visit the most. Great question. Austria, Ireland, in no particular order. Poland. I'm thinking about this a little bit. I've only been in Germany for a few hours 2 different times, so I would add Germany to that just because I haven't spent significant time in Germany, and I've only been kind of in border areas for a few hours here and there. And then I would say Switzerland. Yeah, very pro-European list, I know. Russia, maybe down the road, would be very cool. Ooh, New Zealand would be nice. I would like that a lot. Haven't been to the Middle East, no. A lot of countries. There are very few countries you could name that I wouldn't at least like to visit at some point. In a perfect world, I've got dreams of later this year, maybe visiting Germany, like an extended stay in Germany. But I don't want to do that until I feel at least passable in conversational German, and I'm far from that right now. I'm kind of working on that. Anyway, okay, so I support compromise, but the fugitive slave law goes too far in protecting the institution. That might alienate me with some of these southern states, but I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get those southern states anyway. I think I'm going to stay vague. I don't know if that's going to help me. Your emphasis on the Union and sectional compromise is viewed by the South as an acceptance of the compromise and keeps the North in line. The fact that you left the question of whether or not you view the compromise as a final settlement of the slavery issue unanswered prevents you to rally all Southerners to your candidacy, however. Yeah. I know, yeah, in general, my experience in Europe has been that Europeans are pretty good with English. I've actually met very few Europeans who don't. Hold on, my mom texted me. I have to respond. So. Okay. Anyway, you gotta respond to mom when she texts, right? I haven't played as Brian yet. That would be a fun one to do. Puerto Rico is a place I'd like to visit. My sister's been to Puerto Rico. Okay. Despite the fact you have been a Whig for a long time, your policy stance are not exactly well known. To solve this, you have endeavored to write multiple letters stating your stances on the issues of the day. Your campaign managers, however, are wary that such letters could prove harmful to your campaign. How will you address these fears? They have a point. I will give my campaign managers the right to proofread my letters before they're published. Since an intervention helps you avoid any blunder and your letters still publicize your views, this would be a net positive for your campaign. So I feel like so far, while I'm not doing anything huge that's going to help me win, I'm at least not making any major blunders. Who is the best president economically speaking? Oh, that's tough. I mean, because there's so many different eras that we could talk to. And I'll be honest, economics is not my strong suit when it comes to my understanding of history. I think there might be an 1880 Grant mod. We'll have to take a look at the mods. Coolidge. Cleveland or Coolidge, I would say Coolidge. All right. Across the rivers of Canada, under the sun of Mexico, you have served the Union for more than 40 years. How much do you plan to emphasize this as you campaign? And this is one of those tricky things because I do have that military background, but so does Franklin Pierce. So it's not a huge advantage for me. I want to focus Make mention of it, though, as part of a balanced campaign strategy. Don't forget the politics as well. This strikes a good balance. So North Carolina is still pretty even. We've got a slight advantage. I feel like Virginia is winnable with its 15 electoral votes, but beyond that, it's still going to be pretty tough. The Whigs do not seem in a strong position this fall, to say the least. Yeah. And some campaign managers feel that you need to go on the attack. I do need to do something to shake this up. Attack Pierce on his conduct during the Mexican-American War. Will attack, but not in excess. Way to remind voters of your credentials, especially in contrast of your opponents. Okay. There we go. Louisiana, only 6 electoral votes, but that has swung into kind of the toss-up category now. Truman or Eisenhower? I like them both, but I would have to say Eisenhower of the two. Incidentally, the last... No, I shouldn't. No, I take that back. Not the last president to serve in combat. Wasn't Truman. That would be George H.W. Bush. But one of the last presidents who actually saw combat would be Truman. He was a captain of an artillery battery in World War I. Best president for me, Theodore Roosevelt. Adams versus Jefferson's tough because it's not really a campaign, you know what I mean? It was before the time when there really were campaigns. JFK or Nixon, I'd take Nixon. The Walker tariff that provides low tariff rates. Remember, this is the time in history when the primary income for the federal government is tariffs. There's no income tax or anything like that. The Real RMG, thank you for that. Any historical subjects you don't like to talk about on YouTube or in general, either due to complexity, disinterest, or other. Primarily the more recent stuff. I start to get uncomfortable when we get into the 1970s because those seem to be hot button issues for a lot of people still. There are a lot of things I have strong opinions on that I don't offer those opinions on. And there are certain historical topics that you have to be very careful to be clear with so that you're not misunderstood. Anything to do with slavery, for example, or the American Civil War, race relations, things like that seem to get pretty testy at times. Who wins in a fight between Teddy Roosevelt and Andrew Jackson? Probably Andrew Jackson, just because I think physically he was probably stronger. Teddy Roosevelt was tenacious, but so was Andrew Jackson. But Teddy Roosevelt wasn't necessarily a very physically imposing person. The Walker, the Taylor-Fillmore administrations have left it untouched. As the Union enters a new phase of economic growth, what is your stance on tariffs? Let's look at the map. We don't really... Okay, so where do people fall on tariffs? The South is pretty strongly opposed to tariffs, but you see support in the North for that. But again, it's pretty slight. Moderate. The moderate stance helps keep you in contention in the South and satisfies the North. But again, it's not going to do anything to help rock the boat enough to get me votes, unfortunately. True, Roosevelt did box, and he actually boxed in the White House and lost the sight in one of his eyes during a boxing match in the White House. So that's a fair argument. Most jacked president? Ooh, that's a good question. George Washington was a pretty physically imposing guy. Thoughts on Robert Kennedy? I personally like Robert Kennedy. I'm not entirely sure he was the right candidate for the time. But yeah, I think he could have been a great president. Catholics have become a key voting bloc, in part due to the large immigration that have arrived since the famine of 1846. So this is going to be primarily North New York. This would be a good way to swing New York, trying to appeal to Catholics. But again, you're seeing kind of indifference in a lot of places to this. Attempting to speak directly to Catholics might backfire. We can meet with Archbishop Hughes of New York and Purcell of Cincinnati to gain their endorsement. While the meeting between Hughes and your emissaries was unfruitful, Purcell will encourage his priest to support your candidacy. This will help you win the West without hurting you among the nativists. All right, so we're super close in some of these places. Not entirely sure it's going to be enough, though. Nothing has really changed. Hey, Starlight SZ, thank you for that. Andre David, Martin Luther King Jr. for me. I'm not a fan of Malcolm X's strategy. I don't feel like responding to hate and violence with hate and violence is an effective strategy. As Martin Luther King said, you're just multiplying hate by doing that. And you give ammunition to the people who claim that you are something that you really aren't. So, Simon Belmont, thank you for that. Aaron Burr challenges Andrew Jackson to a duel. Jackson gets to choose the weapons. Andrew Jackson, well experienced in duels, and I think a much more decisive person than Aaron Burr. Jackson chooses canes and wins. Favorite historical time period? I got a couple: American Civil War, World War I, and British medieval history. Anti-slavery Free Soil Party is holding its convention this August in Pittsburgh, and it appears that New Hampshire Senator John Parker Hale will be nominated. Whig strategists such as Thurlow Weed and Schuyler Colfax have advocated Schuyler Colfax will later be vice president under... Was he vice president under Ulysses S. Grant? He was the Speaker of the House during Lincoln's administration. I feel like Colfax was vice president under Grant. Or did he just run? Yeah, he was. He was Grant's vice president for his first term. Speaker of the House before that. So, we need to try and do well with this one. Salmon Chase is from Ohio. He's going to be a leading Republican in a few years. Very abolitionist. Colfax is still young but has good instincts. William Seward will be the only one able to persuade Hale. Let's try that. Fearing that being associated with his campaign will hurt Scott's candidacy, Seward refuses to meet with Hale and stays in New York. Hale eventually gets nominated, but his speeches in Ohio and Michigan will help split the vote in your favor here. Yeah, that might take a few turns to help out, though. I have not heard of The Who, Ian. The caning of Charles Sumner, that would be an interesting video. We will do some more CGP Grey down the road. President from the 20th century, they could easily get elected today. I think Theodore Roosevelt would be one. I have seen the History of Christianity, I guess, video pop up in my recommendations. I have not watched it. Due to the Great Irish Famine and German revolutions of 1848-49, a large number of immigrants have arrived on U.S. shores. With their naturalization, more and more are becoming potential electors, and they form a key Democratic-leaning constituency in the East and Middle West. This is a tough one. If they serve in the Army, their waiting times will be shortened. Let's try it. Nativists view this as a rebuke of your previous views, while immigrants do not trust such an ambiguous pivot. Ooh, it's the worst. That's my first major blunder right there. Greg, thank you for that. Fan from Northeast Ohio, what part? Very cool. Nativists opposed to foreign immigration, especially Catholic, to the United States, have been firmly in our column for a decade. We're not going to carry Pennsylvania and New Jersey by large margins, so All right, we're gonna start leaning toward the immigrants here. This might be too forceful. Perhaps you do not need nativists after all. I don't know. Greg Menor, yes, I've spoken several times at the middle schools and the high school in Menor. Very cool. Lots of snow up that way on a regular basis. How do I think Patton would do as a Civil War general? I think he's the kind of guy that would do well in any era. The real RMG, thank you for that. If I took English, British monarchs, and the U.S. presidents, had them all play a big strategy game like Civilization, who wins as an individual and which group performs better as a whole? That's a tough one. I'd say presidents because they're politicians. Whereas most English, British monarchs didn't have to be so concerned with rallying the people behind them. You're related to Manfred von Richthofen. Very cool. And thank you for that, Snake Venom. All right. Pierce's statements on slavery have given us an opportunity to attack. In January, he told an audience in New Hampshire that he found the fugitive slave law inhumane. Keep this attack in Southern newspapers. Many Northern Whigs do agree with him. Let's do that. So let's focus our attacks on him in the South in that one. So I think we could take Louisiana and North Carolina. Not sure we're swinging anything else our way, unfortunately. Polk or Monroe? I'd take Polk. Hey, Spencer, just across the Lake Erie in Ontario. Presidents in the 1850s were so bad because the situation was really bad, and someone who might have been an average president in another time was bad in the 1850s because of the situation. There was just no win. You needed an exceptional person at that point, I think. Do I think MacArthur would have been a good president? No, I'm not a huge MacArthur fan, and I don't think that he's the kind of person who would have listened well to others. Representative Andrew Johnson from Tennessee, future president, has been advocating for a homestead bill in the House, which would provide for cheap land grants to those who want to migrate in territories. This is a bill that the Homestead Act would be passed in Abraham Lincoln's first term. Why is that a threat to slaveholding interests in the long term? Because the whole argument over slavery right now is primarily over the expansion of slavery to new territories. Let's support the homesteads. Johnson's pleased and Northern voters are too. The South, not so much. So, unfortunately, yeah, I might have to try and focus on the North a little bit here. Maybe I should have from the beginning. I don't know if Winfield Scott would have been a good president. Not during this time. I don't think he had what it takes to be any better. Who's better militarily, Pershing or Patton? I would say Patton. What a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of Pershing's military strategy in World War I was either out of his hands and controlled by people like Marshal Foch from the French, or planned out by a young staff officer of his, George C. Marshall. What Pershing was really good at is recognizing talent. I see a lot of parallels between Pershing and George Washington in that. It's not that Pershing wasn't a good general. I just don't know that we have enough to go on to see that. But he was very good at recognizing talent. Pershing is the reason we end up with people like George C. Marshall and George Patton in prominent roles. Excel, thank you for that. If Napoleon didn't invade Russia, Europe would look very different. I do absolutely believe that. Nathaniel, thank you for that. Southwest Missouri. Hey, JD's home state of Missouri. Do I feel there's a period of U.S. history that is undertaught? Absolutely. Reconstruction. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, Professor Watt, that because Marshall's not a guy you hear about a lot during World War I, but Marshall basically was the author of U.S. strategy in World War I. He was on Pershing's staff and starts out as like this he's like a major or something, but he ends up a colonel, I think, by the end of the war. But he's on Pershing's staff. Basically, he was like the Alexander Hamilton to George Washington in World War I, kind of running the show on behalf of the general. You're from Kansas, very close to Mr. Beat. Very cool. Better General Grant or Eisenhower? Grant. Okay. Your campaign has been marked by an important innovation. Your campaign headquarters, based in D.C., have been able to successfully coordinate with statewide Whigs and efficiently dispatch pamphlets there. So kind of, grassroots, ground level campaign thing going on. What should we distribute the most? We can attack. So commitment to compromise and my independence from Seward. Let's do that. This pamphlet addresses the issues many had with your candidacy and will help you make your case this fall. So we got a lot of states where we've moved the dial in our direction, but not enough to win them over. MacArthur was a fearless general. He was a brigadier general on the Western Front in World War I. And MacArthur's father was a war hero in the American Civil War. He was a legend in his own mind. Yeah, that's probably fair. You live in Springfield, Missouri, Nathaniel. Okay, very cool. I have not been to the Wilsons Creek battlefield, but it's definitely high on my list of places I'd like to get to. Your running mate, William Alexander Graham, just resigned from his post as Secretary of the Navy to focus on the campaign. Where would he be most useful? In the South. Oh, wait. Make sure our pamphlets and campaign material emphasize his experience. Let's do that. This helps your case. Will it be enough to win this November? Man. Some of these states are like, I feel like New York and Ohio are so close. Compromise, they're neutral. Ohio actually opposes compromise. What has surprised me in the Napoleonic Wars series so far the most? I'm impressed by the coalition's ability to learn from their past mistakes, to work together, coordinate, and to use some of Napoleon's own strategies against him. I'm also a little bit surprised by Napoleon's lack of compromise himself. I feel like had he been a little more willing to compromise on some things, he might have held on to his throne, and Europe looks very different. Yeah, it was a great comeback for the Baggies today. Burnley's going to batter us next week. We shall see. Could Lincoln defeat LBJ? Not sure. Not sure about that. Some Whig strategists believe that a good way to come back against the Democrats would be to break their hold over the Catholic vote. Attack Pierce as anti-Catholic. That might help me in Ohio and New York. But Pierce is no friend to the Catholics. Pierce does his best to explain his position, which will reduce damage from this attack. It still hurts him and will help you overall despite the protests of some nativists. Okay, cool. Yeah, I kind of feel like F. Shopes has got it right. Nobody beats LBJ in 64. Why did Lincoln pick bad generals until Grant? I don't know that he strictly picked bad generals. Lincoln, ever the politician, I think there was a lot of politics that went into some of his decisions as far as generals went. But I don't know that some of them were bad generals. I feel like Lincoln's issue was less about bad generals and more about inserting himself too much into those generals' day-to-day running of the army. Okay. The moralist crusade for alcohol prohibition, we're way ahead of things on that one, has been gaining ground in New England, with the state of Maine adopting last year the famous Maine law prohibiting the sale of liquor. Other states want to follow this lead. While these measures are supported by those with a Puritan or nativist outlook, so Northeast it's going to play well, they're unpopular with many immigrants who believe these laws to be an attack on their way of life. Leave it to the states. Let's do that. This answer focuses on states' rights, helps you keep in contention without alienating any large block of voters. Man, just can't seem to swing those states, though. Nothing has really changed. Nico, yes, I'm going to be in Belgium in a few weeks. I'm going to be in just for a couple of days doing a tour that's going to be leaving out of Bastogne. Kind of doing some of the Battle of the Bulge sites. Actually, don't know exactly where we're going to be yet in that. Extra history series on Frederick the Great we'll do at some point. Renegade Congressman Thomas Klingman from North Carolina's 1st District just endorsed Pierce. His sway over his key district might just be what flips North Carolina in the Democratic fold. My running mate hails from there. He should meet with local Whigs to energize them. Let's use the strength of our ticket in North Carolina. I think we'll be okay in North Carolina. Oh my gosh, I just need to swing a few percentage points in some of these states. Probably not enough to win, but Hungarian revolutionary Louis Kossuth arrives on American shores in December of 1851. Is engaged on a speaking tour that gave him great popularity. He's massively popular on the East Coast among German immigrants. We could meet with him. I don't want to go with American intervention in Europe. We support them, but in no position to intervene on the continent. You're faithful to your party's policies, even when they happen to be unpopular. Ugh. The South appreciates this, but the Northerners and immigrants are dissatisfied. All right, so that hurt. That did not help us. All right, Daniel Webster refused to endorse me. He's been urging his friends to vote for Pierce. I'm not going to denounce abolitionists. We're going to compromise. Nativist appeals have their expected supporters and detractors. You do sway a few Websterites. Okay. Why did Spain basically do nothing in the Spanish-American War? I'm not really sure they were in a position to do a whole lot. I've been to Blue Lick Springs, Kentucky. Very cool. Your little odyssey will take you through New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. Address crowds directly and make a bid for the immigrant vote. No, we'll address the crowds directly and emphasize wartime service and commitment to the Union. Let's do that. Your pompous style of campaigning attracts you some mockery, but it could have been worse. All right, so that did not help. Wolf Canada, I really want to get to Vimy Ridge, and I hope it'll happen at some point. It won't be on my upcoming trip, though. Okay, state and federal support for internal improvements have been a key issue over the past decades. Infrastructure was a huge issue in this period in history. I'm going to support strongly this. Detractors in the South. I feel like I might do better in the popular vote than Scott did, but I'm not going to do any better in the electoral vote. All right, let me try and get these last two questions out of the way here. The Bank of the United States. We're going to just stay out of that issue. No harm, no foul. Let's focus on New York. It's close. Not entirely sure I'm going to sway it, though. Don't think I'm going to do any better. Luxembourg, it was on the list for my first 2 trips to Europe, and I didn't make it. So, I don't know where our tour's going from Bastogne. If we're really lucky, maybe we go down to Luxembourg, but I'm not sure. Jacob, I've been to South Mountain, and I definitely want to get there again for some content. Wyoming is a beautiful state. Loved my visit to Wyoming. We lost Ohio. We lost Pennsylvania. We've won the 4 states that Scott won historically. Might get North Carolina. That's going to be about it. No, it didn't even get North Carolina. Dang. Did not do any better than Winfield Scott. I didn't win New York either. I'm doing slightly better than he did historically. I got 0.2% more of the vote than Winfield Scott did. So that was miserable and didn't really help me much at all. All right, so I'm just kind of catching up on some things here, and then we'll do one more. I'm out of stuff to drink, so I'm going to take a 3-minute break. I'm going to go grab a quick snack and get some more to drink, and then I'll come back and we'll do one more. And we'll do a poll to see which one you guys want to do. So let me do that real quick. And then he was just too attractive to beat. Widely considered to be one of our more attractive presidents. Yes. So, all right. So let's go to the mod loader, and I'll show you some of the ones that are available here. We did mention the possibility of maybe doing 1880. So we'll make 1880 a choice. What else? I want to see real quick what the choices are for 1880. To see if Grant's a possibility there. So let's take a look. Can we play as Grant in 1880? No, we can only be Hancock or Garfield for that one. So we'll make that one of our choices. 1880. We could. I feel like I've done Tilden versus Hayes before. I keep forgetting how to do this the right way here. 1876. A lot of people are saying. We could do 64. The last time I did 64, that's a 50 question one. That'll be for another day. Dewey in 48 might be interesting. I feel like that's one I've done before too, but maybe not. A perfectly normal 1948 mod. 1916B. Incumbent Roosevelt versus Bryan. Interesting. Okay, so a lot of people are saying that. So here, let's create a poll. So we're going to do 1916B, which is TR versus Bryan. We can do 1876, Tilden versus Hayes. And we can do, what did we say the other option was that we were looking at? 1880. Hancock versus Garfield. So 2 of these would require me to run against the Ohio president. I'm going to let you guys vote. I will be right back. Okay. So it looks like TR versus Bryan winning big on this one. 1916B. Gonna have an apple fritter Pop-Tart and some Monster. No suit disappointment. Okay. Since this is a completely fictitious election, I gotta get to choose who I play as. So I feel like if Roosevelt is the incumbent, the U.S. is probably already at war by this point. So I'm going to take another bite. So Landon, your grandpa who died when you were in your 20s voted for Wilson in 1912 and was in Milwaukee when Roosevelt was shot. Very cool. All right, so 54% it is. What flavor of Monster? This is the orange Ultra Sunrise. It's the zero sugar ones. That's all I drank are the zero sugar ones. Do I agree with your history teachers that presidents who had military experience were better than the others? Hard to say because almost every president has had military experience. There's only been a few that haven't. I mean, it's like less than 10 have no military. In fact, it might even be like 5. Just thinking off the top of my head, presidents with no military experience: FDR, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Donald Trump. So more recently, there's more of them. But beyond that, I'm not thinking off the top of my head of too many that don't have some military experience. When I was in Scotland, did I have Iron Brew? Yes, I did. It tastes like bubble gum. It was okay. I wasn't a huge fan of it. Yeah, LBJ was definitely in the military. Now, combat experience is a different issue. But LBJ was definitely in the military. George Bush, 43, had military experience. Reagan was in the U.S. Army during World War II, John Potts. Biden, you're right. Biden does not have. So, see, it's a much more common thing recently. Many of the recent presidents, no military experience. Herbert Hoover might not have had military experience. Jefferson technically did because he was in a militia colonel or something during the Revolutionary War. I said Trump. Carter went to the U.S. Military Academy at Annapolis, or the U.S. Naval Academy. Carter's one of our few who actually went to a military college. Jasper Lane, thank you for that. Is there a way to recommend videos for me to react to? Really, any just comment on any video, and I read every comment. So, yeah, FDR served as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. That's right. Coolidge may not have had military experience. John Adams, good question. He may not have. Andre, we're not talking about combat experience. So whether or not Carter served in World War II is irrelevant to whether he had military experience. Simon Belmont, Darth Vader is on the side of the British Empire at the Battle of Yorktown. Do they crush the rebel scum? Nope, not even Darth Vader can help him in that one. Austin, I feel like 14 is too high. I don't feel like there are 14 presidents who had no military experience. I want to say there's less than that. That's something we're going to have to look at. I did a video on that, all the presidents' military experience. There's actually a YouTube video about that. So let's look at this for a second because I want to see which ones they're saying did not. Adams, that's probably true. John Quincy Adams, Martin Van Buren. Okay. Grover Cleveland, he's counted twice. Taft, I don't think that's true. I feel like Taft did, but maybe I'm wrong. Okay. I mean, maybe that is right then. But there you see the list. And most of them were high-ranking officers. Exceptions like James Buchanan, who was a private in the Pennsylvania militia. He's one of the only ones who was not an officer. In fact, he's the only president who was an enlisted man only. Like McKinley started out as an enlisted man, but ended up a brevet major. Doing well, history nerd. How about yourself? Okay. So let's go ahead and dive in. We are going to take on the role of Theodore Roosevelt in this one. I like the idea of the current governor of California as a running mate, so we're going to choose him. I'm going to move through this one a little faster, so I'm not going to necessarily read everything word for word. I'll just let you kind of look at that. Deontay Smith, while technically right, and Andre too, the argument is typically, and I tend to agree with this, Teddy would not have died in office because one of the things that is attributed to his early death, because he died pretty young, was this Amazon expedition that he went on after he'd become a private citizen and left office. Had he stayed in office as president, he probably doesn't go on that expedition. He's probably getting better health care in general. Then he lives longer, would be the argument there. So let's take a look here. My VP does not work. Okay. So William Simons, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Y'all, you're sitting in your VTH shirt. Very cool. Appreciate that. CBB, thank you. And it's sort of weird that despite the length and number of people involved, we never had a Vietnam vet as president. Yeah, I would say that window has passed. The closest we got to that was John Kerry in 2004, who was a Vietnam vet. Undersittable, thank you. My favorite Monster flavor, and why is it the orange one? It's actually not. It's the apple flavor that I like the most, the green one. But the orange one is typically the only one I can find in a 12-pack in this area. So okay, I feel like this did not work. Or is it still just saying Hughes and Fairbanks? So it might be that I can't choose that. Yeah, McCain. Yeah, right. McCain. Totally forgot about John McCain. Absolutely a Vietnam veteran. So let's go back to this. Do I have to choose Hadley then? Was Al Gore wasn't a Vietnam veteran, was he? Was Al Gore a Vietnam veteran? Okay, there we go, Roosevelt and Hadley, so we can do that. Okay, I did not realize that. Chief of Naval Operations William S. Benson approached you with an urgent communique from Admiral John Jellicoe, who we all know, if you're familiar with World War I, from the British Navy. I typically only have one of these monsters a day. I don't drink more than that. He's requesting American capital ships to assist in intercepting German high seas fleet off the coast of Denmark near Jutland. So getting the U.S. Navy involved in Jutland? Interesting. I feel like that's the kind of thing Theodore Roosevelt might do, but people are saying they'll destroy your Navy. Don't do it. It's a German trap. Don't do it. It's a trap. Your instincts prove correct. The Battle of Jutland turns out to be a disastrous defeat for the British Navy. This will slightly decrease domestic support for the war, but at least there weren't any American casualties. So thank you for that warning, guys. We are down 324 to 207, so that's what we're dealing with. Right now, it's just pretty much the Northeast, but that's where most of the electoral votes are. Was TR a pro or anti-prohibition guy? Great question. The colors are interesting. I feel like he was anti, but don't quote me on that. This is 1916 Roosevelt. Thousands of American troops line trenches in France. What will be the main theme of your speech to the Republican convention? 1 year ago, the German Empire demonstrated a flagrant disregard for American sovereignty by murdering our citizens on the Lusitania. The struggle we find ourselves in today is one of liberty versus tyranny, of decency versus vice. I feel like maybe while supporting the war, we should probably emphasize the domestic in this one. New nationalism. Let's take a look. I mean, the Northeast, in terms of mobilization, they're mixed to slightly opposed. So I feel like I don't want to go too strong on that. Would TR supported Harding in 1920? That's tough. Maybe? Ready, thank you for that. And is there a chance that LBJ would lose in 64 if the Republicans had nominated Rockefeller? I feel like LBJ in 64 is one of those almost impossible to beat candidates. There are few elections in history that I feel like it really didn't matter who was nominated on the other side, and I feel like that's probably one of them. But Rockefeller, like F. Shopes is saying, Rockefeller would have been a much better candidate for the Republicans. I will say this. Rockefeller being nominated in 64 doesn't change the outcome of that election, but it does change the direction and the future of the Republican Party. So from that standpoint, it could have a huge impact on history. Obama in 08 is probably a good example as well. Nixon did win in 72. Oh, you mean if they hadn't done what they did at Watergate? I don't think Watergate changed anything as far as the outcome of the election. Okay, galvanize progressives who support you and energize conservatives who despise you. Well, that's what we need. We got to visit a state. Let's go to Ohio. Old Guard Republican Party has reached a boiling point. They accept your nomination in 1912. One particularly influential member of the Old Guard, William Barnes of New York, has told you to meet with him as soon as possible or face the consequences of his opposition. Here's the problem. You don't tell Theodore Roosevelt what to do and have it go very well. I'm not going to let him dictate to me what to do. So we're going to say no. Barnes isn't a simpleton and knows when you're attempting to string him along. Rumor has it Barnes will be paying a visit to the Democratic Convention in St. Louis. Interesting. So we got to be careful. We don't want to lose New York. But remember, Roosevelt's home state is New York, so he's not going to lose it easily. Gerald Ford in 76, that's another tough one. I think Ford was a solid candidate, and in any other year might have done well. 76 was almost an impossible election for the Republicans to win. Elections, do I think it didn't matter who ran on the losing side, Nathaniel? 76 an example. 64 is an example. I feel like the 36, 40, and 44 elections were almost impossible to win for the Republicans. 64 for the Democrats. 1864 for the Democrats. 32, yeah, probably a good example too. Entered the Great War in June 1915 after the sinking of the Lusitania. American troops have yet to engage in the conflict in any major way, and the Allies seem to be on their heels after Gallipoli debacle, the Battle of Verdun, and setbacks on the Eastern Front. William Jennings Bryan is calling for an end to the entire war on the campaign trail and holds a commanding lead. As the man who pushed for America's entry into the war and its most enthusiastic supporter, how will you boost domestic support for the conflict? Sergeant Alvin York is quite a fellow who demonstrated immeasurable valor on the battlefield. I like that idea. Let's appeal to Alvin York. Sergeant York becomes a popular war hero, and his story convinces a sizable segment of the American public that the Great War is winnable. 82nd all the way, baby. Go Alvin York, one of my favorite Americans. He's a Southerner from down in Tennessee, kind of the Tennessee-Kentucky border. Alvin York is. Let's do New York. Let's make sure we hold the line there. Leonard Wood of the American Expeditionary Force. So he's in command, yeah. That probably makes sense. If you go to war in 1915, it's probably not Pershing. It probably is Leonard Wood in command of the American forces. To discuss final preparations for the upcoming Anglo-American Somme offensive on July 1st. Oh boy. Well, we know how the Somme offensive goes historically. Aerial reconnaissance, increase the amount of missions over the line of attack to ensure the success of the operation. Lewis and Clark expedition is one of those cool moments in American history. Why did the U.S. still use Napoleonic tactics until the Civil War? Because all of the U.S. generals were educated in Napoleonic tactics at West Point. All right, these extra missions allowed Allied howitzers to correctly identify their targets. The opening barrage annihilates German defenders stationed north of the Albert-Bapaume Road. U.S. troops meet little resistance as they rush the German trenches. Only 2,000 casualties. Yes, we won the Battle of the Somme on July 1st. Awesome stuff. A couple days ago, Scoville Manufacturing's artillery shell factory in Waterbury, Connecticut underwent a violent strike. That's not good. But hey, Theodore Roosevelt is a friend to the American worker, so we have to emphasize this. But he did also intervene in strikes in other times. So I have to directly intervene. All right. While management conservatives are cranky, you have further enhanced your image among progressives without completely alienating the old guard of your party. But so far, we're not really changing anything. We do need to try and expand our reach a little bit. Let's go to Missouri. Bugnum, if I got the chance, I would absolutely love to see Rourke's Drift in Izan Luana. I know my friend JD from the History Underground has been to South Africa, I think, but not to make content for his channel. Prior to our involvement in the Great War, two major pieces of progressive legislation, the Clayton Antitrust Act, and let's see. You intend to pass any additional economic reforms. I feel like now's not the time for economic reforms with the war going on. Once the war reaches an agreeable conclusion, we return to normalcy. I like that idea. Let's do that. The old guard perceives this as an olive branch, even if it retains progressive tax policies. Many prefer Bryan's more ambitious agenda, however. Okay. So maybe that wasn't the best approach. Zach Mills, what is going on? Thank you for that, sir. Sure. Thank you, sir. Go Astros, he says. Yeah, actually, just saw the thing in the news about Jeff Daniels. Thought that was really neat to find out his great-great-grandfather was in the Iron Brigade. Sorry, I didn't have lunch, so I'm eating a Pop-Tart. Do I believe the USA crushed German morale and made them surrender? Maybe. Rita, hey, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Rita is not only my second cousin, she's also one of my besties, you might say. Appreciate that, Rita. Glad you're here. Okay. Never had a Pop-Tart. They're like this little breakfasty type thing. You know, I know you guys in Europe eat like the full breakfast with like a full meal with meat and everything. We do. It's a pastry, basically, is what it is. All right. One unprecedented aspect of mobilization is that there's been the introduction of price controls for wheat and livestock. This bolstered farmers in long struggling rural areas across the country. When the Great War ends, how will you approach agricultural policy? Okay, interesting. We do need to kind of reach out to the Midwest, right? We're not doing well there. Some support of agricultural policies would, like pro-farmer policies, I think would go a long way. So, yeah, let's say, hey, listen, we're trying to support our farmers. Let's do this. Farmers are lining up behind your candidacy in droves. Yes, but conservatives are not going to let this go unpunished. All right, well, I mean, what are you going to do? Let's go back to Ohio. Yeah, most of the rest of my family prefers Pop-Tarts in the toaster. My wife loves them that way. My daughter does too. I just typically just grab them and open them and eat them. Brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts are probably my favorite. All right, another year, another revenue act. It takes a turn or two to see the results of some of these choices that we make. In 1915, with your support, Congress pursued massive income tax increases. Yeah. Encourage bonds might be a way to go. How do people feel about economics? They're all pretty moderate. So, yeah. I kind of feel like I want to support, Liberty bonds. Let's do that. Congress passes a 10% income tax increase on high brackets, and for once you sign it without much fanfare, allowing Brian and the Democrats to soak up the fury of big business. Dr. Chemical, thank you for that. I love Hearts of Iron 4. I really want to get a multiplayer series going on Hearts of Iron 4. Just got to find the time. Reddy, thank you for that. What would be the major changes if the U.S. did not get militarily involved in the Great War no matter what? I think if the U.S. doesn't get involved no matter what, that there's a more patient military policy on the part of the Germans, and I think there's a good chance Germany can win the war on the Western Front, or at least sue for peace. A much more favorable peace in 1917. Once Russia goes out of the war, I feel like Germany's got an advantage. So, national print media has become fixated on the issue of anarchist agitation. So how do we deal with anarchists and extremists? I don't think we want to crack down too hard on this one. I'm not going to do a sedition act. That would be very out of character for Theodore Roosevelt. So, yeah, let's just say, listen, the Justice Department shall publish safety assurances in America's newspapers. Fear sells better than security, but this still helps you. We're still not really doing a lot here. Leo, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Appreciate that you've been watching. Are we role-playing as Ted? Kinda. There's been a few I haven't quite gone the way that Ted probably would have, but Mika, you said chess is a great strategy game. Let me talk to you about chess for a minute, okay? So my 10-year-old, he's my youngest. He really got into chess, started getting into chess a few months ago. And So he and I have been playing, not every day, but regularly for the last couple of weeks. And the first 3 times in a row, he got this. Yes, my wife's in the other room saying Harry Potter. This Harry Potter chess set where it's Lego Harry Potter and you have to put all the things together and everything. First 3 times we played, I beat him all 3 times. But every time I beat him, he was getting a little bit better. And I would watch him. This is my 10-year-old, mind you. I would watch him after we would play. He was in the other room pulling up YouTube videos about chess strategy, learning so he could get better, and he would start using these strategies. He starts using the King's Gambit and Sicilian defense and all these things like that. And every time he started getting better, and then after the 3rd time we played that I beat him, he beat me, and then he beat me again, and then he beat me again. And each time it was better than the one before. Then I beat him a couple of times, and then the most recent time he beat me out of the blue. Like, I thought I was doing well, and I was winning. I had taken out his queen. Didn't think I was in any danger whatsoever. And boom, he nailed me. I was indeed blindsided. He got me big time. So anyway, where are we going this time? Back to Ohio again. Between visiting France to review American troops and consulting Commander Wood on wartime strategy, you've had little time to campaign in earnest. An opening in your schedule to deliver a speech. Where will you choose to orate? The industrial heartland of this nation finds its center in the sprawling steel plants of Canton, Ohio, less than an hour from my house. Yeah, we're going to do that. The steelmen of Canton shower you in their praises. Shoring up the support of industrial workers will help you come fall. It's going to take a little time to see that reflected, but we're starting to see a little bit of a shift. Andre, I am a favor of alternative history. And if you've seen, I've done a lot of videos about alt history because I think it's a great, unique way to look at what actually happened in history by examining alternate outcomes if particular events went differently. So, Jorgen, things are going great. How about yourself? You are the first commander-in-chief since 1789 to serve 3 terms. And if you win this election, you can end up governing a 4th. Let's see. The world is not as Washington left. I think we're going to kind of go, this is a standard political attack. Okay, no, we're going to focus on both the robber baron and the Kaiser, so let's do that. Conservatism is not popular with the average American, and this answer ties Brian to it masterfully while amplifying your progressive persona. This is a period known as the progressive era in politics, so it's a time when conservatism is not popular like it said. So anything we can do to make Brian seem more conservative and us seem more populist is definitely going to help. You can see we're starting to solidify in some of these states, but we're not doing enough yet to shift things in some other places. I'm going to go to Iowa. Favorite Harry Turtledove book? Ooh, probably Guns of the South. Who helped make the Monroe Doctrine more? Monroe or John Quincy Adams, I think, did. Yes, Zach Mills. I am really, really excited about that Whiskey and Lemons DLC that's coming out for Grand Tactician. That's going to give like a whole new layer of fun to that game. All right, let's try and wrap this up here. We got 12 more questions. After 2 months of brutal fighting, the Somme offensive has stalled. American casualties are upwards of 100,000. Wow. As you confer with Henry Stimson, Secretary of War, and Secretary of State Henry Cabot Lodge, how do you plan to rectify it? All right, we're gonna go to Blackjack Pershing. We're gonna put him in charge. A public reprimand of Field Marshal Haig. Let's not do that. We're gonna put Pershing in control. While this inspires optimism among some of the electorate, many wonder what actually changes. All right, we'll see. How are things going? Still not great, unfortunately. Emperor Tiger Star, what is going on? Definitely check his channel out if you guys get the chance. Love your stuff. Halt the offensive. Yeah, I probably should have. Republican lawmakers are encouraging you to weigh in on the Sedition Act. Yeah, I've got to oppose that. Let's see. Yeah, we're not going to support that. Bill passes despite your opposition. You have no choice but to sign it in the face of massive electoral consequences. While you managed to briefly gain the respect of William Jennings Bryan, this move has weakened your image as a war leader. All right, so that didn't help. Don't oppose it. You passed it. Yeah, that was bad move on my part. Paranoia among the British public have offered your assistance. UK's Secret Intelligence Service. See, the problem is if that came out publicly, that would look really, really bad. Ricky, for those of you who don't know, if you ever see people commenting and calling me Sam or talking about my grasp of Indian history, you need to see my video where I looked up what people said about me on the internet, and you'll understand. It's kind of an inside joke. No, I think the Russian Empire probably collapses regardless. Yeah, I believe too strongly in the values of our republic to allow agents of a foreign power to influence our politics. Nothing wrong with continuing your current course of action. Yeah, except it's not helping me win, and I'm actually lost ground. Probably no Napoleon video coming out today. Under Citable. Yeah, Grand Tactician is probably the best Civil War game to get into, I think. And thank you for that. Vice President Herbert Hadley has offered to campaign on your behalf. Where would he best do? I think we need him out like in the Midwest. Boy, I don't know about this one. Going to try and wrap up the conservatives a little bit. He improves your image among morally upright voters in the upper Midwest or upper South and Midwest, but German, Irish, and Italian immigrants are uncomfortable with these stances. The South is getting more pro-Bryan all the time. Pancho Villa and his band of guerrillas attacked the town of Columbus, New Mexico. Problem is we can't really send Blackjack Pershing because I couldn't put him in command in Europe, but he did historically take the lead on this. Yeah, we're going to send more troops there. Taking the stronger stance empowers Bryan's attacks, but convinces the average American that apprehending Villa is just a matter of time. Yeah, I am not going to win this election. I'm going to be 0 for 2 today. Swedish history is fascinating. I'd like to get into more of it. How would the Treaty of Versailles been different if TR was president? Good question, because I think maybe the Americans get more of a say in the treaty, and therefore maybe it's not as harsh on Germany. If there's one in Monroe 1820 where no matter what you do, Monroe always wins. I mean, it's kind of true, though, right? Because he really was largely unopposed. Your stubborn support of U.S. involvement in the Great War has many wondering what you envision a final treaty would look like. Freedom and democracy. Yeah, let's spread freedom and democracy. This liberal internationalist approach is not popular within your party or with the overwhelmingly majority of Americans. So I'm doing the wrong thing every time here. I have just blown this election to the point where it might be one of the worst landslides in history. All right, so let's go to Pennsylvania and try and salvage that a little bit. We're going to have to do something extreme now. It's unbecoming of a possible vice president. Very bombastic, elitist statement to make to a nation with a rural majority. I cannot possibly make any more wrong choices in this election. All right, let's just accuse him of being, too conservative. Yeah, nothing I can do can win at this point. If Teddy got a third term, it's only fair if Brian got at least one. I think we need a break-in, Nicholas says. I think I might only win Pennsylvania in this election. What? We're gonna come up with an assassination scheme. We're gonna do ridiculous things now. Brian is only wounded by the assassin's bullet due to his pocket Bible. That's accurate. And ends up incapacitated during the crucial weeks he could have spent campaigning. This allows you to capitalize on his absence and claw at his lead. Too bad it's too little, too late. Ready! What would be the aftermath if Germany did not invade the Soviet Union, instead of focus more on Britain in World War II? You might see a negotiated settlement at that point. Switch sides and support Germany. Even that's not going to help me now. Cable from the front, October 22nd, 1916. Oh no. So this did happen historically, but it happened in 1918 historically. United States Army Air Service tragically reports the death of Lieutenant Quentin Roosevelt of the 95th Aero Squadron, President Theodore Roosevelt's 18-year-old son. Lieutenant Roosevelt was bravely carrying out reconnaissance behind enemy lines during the Battle of Le Transloy when he was savagely ambushed by German fighter planes. He was shot down historically. That did happen. All 5 of Theodore Roosevelt's sons did serve on the Western Front during the war, and one of his daughters was there too. Outpouring of sympathy. Again, too little, too late. Let's go to Michigan. Campaign connections to German spies. We can't drag our feet while he openly colludes with our enemies. It completely backfires. Of course it does. So we tried to get him into a meeting and he didn't do it. Look at this. There's never been an election where somebody lost every state. We've come close. Walter Mondale only won Minnesota, and that was super close. But I might do it. French forces have occupied Fort Vaux. Bully for France. Support for the war rises. Yeah, we might win Vermont, and that's going to be about it. Let's go to, at this point, let's just try and lose, right? Lose every state. So we're going to go to the west instead of campaigning in the northeast. All right, here we go. An impressive failure. A 48-state sweep. I don't know. I think I might win Vermont. Just declare yourself a monarchy at this point. Even the, oh my gosh, look how quickly, look how few states have been called, and I've already lost the election. I'm only getting 30% of the vote. Oh, I'm up to 32% now. Come on, Vermont. Go for Brian, Vermont. I won Vermont. I got 4 electoral votes. That's phenomenal. Phenomenally bad. All right, let's see. Here's the final. 527-4. I got 32% of the vote. That is an all-time destruction. All right, we are going to wrap it up right there, guys. Thank you so much for joining this stream. If you haven't already, check out some of my other channels. There are links in the descriptions to most videos for those. And thank you to everybody who donated, and we will see you again real soon.